Today we have the latest NHL trade rumors on top players like Jack Eichel and Jake Debrusk. When will we finally get a deal done for these guys? Also, we have a fairly significant update regarding the NHL participation at the Olympics. We have another signing. We're going to look at also the remaining RFAs that are unsigned. And unfortunately, we have some tragic news from some young hockey players in BC. We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to talk about here today. I do want to kick off today's video with talking about the incredibly sad news that we got from Surrey, BC, where we've had three very young hockey players, all 17 years of age and younger, were unfortunately all killed in a tragic car accident. All three of these guys seem to have pretty bright futures. We don't really know the full scope of what happened. There still appears to be an ongoing investigation from Surrey RCMP. It was a single car crash. All three were pronounced dead at the scene, and that's about as far as I know right now. Like some really tragic events. I know all of them, like I said, were all connected to the local hockey community. And it's an incredibly sad story, so we do want to take some time here and pass along our condolences to all of these families. These three players include Parker Magnuson, 17 years old. We got Caleb Reimer, 16 years old. Reimer was selected in the first round of the Western Hockey League draft by the Edmonton Oilers Kings and had just completed his first season. So he had a lot of great things to say about his future. It appeared to be very bright. And we also had Ronan Sharma, 16 years old as well, who was about to start his rookie campaign in the BCHL. So you hate to hear this, regardless of they're hockey players or not, especially with these young kids, succumbing to these tragic events. Incredibly sad news, and I just wanted to acknowledge what had happened. Certainly pass along my condolences to their friends and family, and really hate to see anything like this happen. So I just want to take a moment here and acknowledge their passing. Now, in other NHL news today, we also have a signing that came in later yesterday. The Philadelphia Flyers have finally come to terms with defenseman Travis Sanheim. The Flyers had set up a team-elected arbitration hearing in case they could not come to terms. So Sanheim and the Flyers come to terms on a 2-year deal at $4.675 average annual value. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see where the future takes them after that. Obviously, Sanheim's been a fairly big piece of that blue line, but we've also seen them totally revamp their blue line this year, and it'd be interesting to see how their long-term plans go and what kind of season they have this year, especially. Obviously, last year was very disappointing for the Flyers, and the lack of success on the blue line was certainly a huge part of that. So nice to see that contract come to terms. I believe that's the final player that was set up for arbitration. That is now settled. We still have several remaining restricted free agents, though, but none of the remaining RFAs that are unsigned have any arbitration rights. So it's going to be between the player and the team to come to terms here on their own. And we have some pretty significant pieces here. I'll give you a quick rundown of all the remaining RFAs and see. Hopefully, we'll get these guys all into NHL contracts before the season starts. But we've got Kyler Yamamoto in Edmonton. You've got Nolan Patrick with Vegas. Jesperi Kotkaniemi with the Montreal Canadiens. Robert Thomas in St. Louis. Noah Gregor with the San Jose Sharks. You've got Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes in Vancouver. They're both going to be significant contracts, and they're both still ready to be signed here. We've also got Andrei Svechnikov in Carolina, also rumored to be getting a pretty significant contract. You get Elias Sorokin and Anthony Beauvillier, both with the New York Islanders. A couple important pieces there as well. You've got Brady Tkachuk and Drake Batherson, both with the Ottawa Senators. Of course, you got Kirill Kaprizov, who we've talked about a lot lately because of that standoff between he and the Wild and the threat to go to the KHL. We don't really know any much more information on that, but as I mentioned in the last video, talking about Kaprizov and the fact that there's a good chance he's not bluffing, and it wouldn't be shocking to see him play in the KHL, but then later in the NHL this year, once he signs, I do think there's a real possibility that could happen because the KHL season actually starts here in September, well ahead of the NHL one. So that's a very interesting situation for us to monitor. You've also got Philip Hronek in Detroit. You've got Glenn Godden, Dylan Dubé, and Connor Mackey with the Calgary Flames. They have 3 cases of players that need new contracts. You've also got Libor Hayek with the New York Rangers. Dennis Cholowski now with the Seattle Kraken. You got Eli Tolvanen with the Nashville Predators. You've also got 3 players with the Buffalo Sabres that include Rasmus Dahlin, Casey Middlestat, and Henry Yokoharu. And all 3 of those players could prove to be pretty important pieces here moving forward with all the changeover that we've seen there and going to continue to see with the Sabres organization. So hopefully those players get contracts soon, but we probably will see a fair bit of these kind of drag on closer to training camp until there's a little bit more of a pressure point to get deals done. That's quite common with this type of player and these types of contracts here. Now, as I mentioned as well, we also have a fairly significant update, at least I view it as pretty significant when it comes to the NHL players participating for the Olympics. Now, we did get word that the IOC, the Olympic Federation here, has agreed to cover the insurance costs for players participating in the qualifying round. Now, some of these guys have had no choice but to participate for their countries that kind of help them qualify for the Olympics. So we're looking at guys like Marco Rossi, Matt Zuccarello, players of countries that are a little smaller, not ranking so high, and really want to make a big difference for their countries. If they don't play, it's a significant setback for those countries and their efforts to qualify for the Olympic Games here. So clearly, with the IOC stepping up and covering insurance costs, which also does have COVID protection in there too, for them to play in those qualifying games, I think that's a good step forward to hopefully have them cover the cost for NHL players going to the regular tournament too, because that is a major stumbling block right now that the NHL players expect that to be covered. The NHL's not covering it. I don't imagine the NHLPA is going to want to cover their small group of players. If you think about the number of guys that would play in the NHL that would actually end up attending, it's actually a pretty small portion of the members of the union, so to speak. So I'm not sure how that would go over well. So I don't see something like that happening here. So we'll see if the IOC can work that out, because we're kind of well past that point here that they really need to get something settled. And the last we did hear about it was that the NHL players would have a make or break decision by the end of August, so that the NHL knows for sure whether or not it's happening, so they can either juggle the schedule, and because they already have backup schedules in place here in case that does not happen, because they have a big break built in the February schedule between having a quick All-Star break and then the Olympic Games. So we'll have to remain to be seen on that. But to me, that's a big step forward. Before we jump into the trade talk today, talking about Eichel and Debrusk, we do need to pause for a moment and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. So thanks very much for watching that promotional video. I do greatly appreciate it. Again, I just want to remind you, and I will remember to actually put the graphic on the screen this time because I've said it a few times and forgot, but there is still a big merchandise sale going on. All of these hoodies have been selling very, very well, and so again, thank you for all your support. But there is a promotion going on depending if you live in Canada or the US. The promotion is different, mainly because all the items ship from the US, so the merch company can't allow me to offer free shipping internationally to Canada or anywhere else. So there's a discount there, but there's free shipping as a promo to any U.S. residents. So certainly, if you haven't done so already, check it out. And for those of you that already have, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much. We are working on a new kind of design for a new series of t-shirts coming out soon. So certainly keep your eye out for that. We're trying to come up with some interesting ideas just to kind of be a little more creative instead of just slapping a logo on a shirt here. So we'll see what we come up with in that regard in the coming days and weeks ahead. Now, getting into the trade talk today, we do have some updates. Nothing too significant, mind you, but there's still some recent articles from NHL writers updating us on this situation. Article in The Athletic from Fluto Shinzawa, who covers the Boston Bruins, talking about Jake Debrusk and the fact that at this point they were kind of analyzing what the Bruins lineup is going to look like this fall once we get through training camp and get this Bruins team back on the ice here. And it's kind of debating whether or not Debrusk is going to be a part of that. He's likely going to be on the third line if he is there. Obviously, he's been inconsistent, and the Bruins were very interested in finding a fresh start for him and bringing in another player that could possibly help them out and be a more consistent piece. The two teams right now that are being linked to having interest in Debrusk both take him back to his home province of Alberta. So the Edmonton Oilers and the Calgary Flames have both apparently expressed interest. It seemed like the Oilers have a little bit more interest, according to what the article said, but the Flames are, somewhat interested, and it kind of kicked tires on the idea as they explore ways to shake up their roster. The Calgary Flames are another team that basically at this point, haven't done a lot in regards to really shaking things up. We thought between Monahan and Gaudreau and that core pieces there in the forward group that we would see a shakeup, and then one of those two guys likely would be traded, or Johnny Gaudreau would either be, if not traded, extended, and nothing has happened. It's been very quiet. Obviously, they lost captain Mark Giordano in Seattle to the expansion draft, and other than that, we haven't really seen a whole lot of change with this Calgary Flames team, and I can't imagine that Bradford Living is really wanting to bring back largely the same group next season. Now, doesn't mean he hasn't been trying to make trades. This means he hasn't pulled anything off. So clearly, I think their preference would be, if they can move Monahan, would be preferable. I don't know that the Boston Bruins would be super keen on his contract. I don't know how they feel about the player. A lot of people have been down on Monahan lately because of the last season and a half and how it's gone. But to be honest, you got to remember, this guy's still only in his mid-20s. Like, he's only, I think he's like 26 years old. And he's got some 30-goal seasons as a center iceman under his belt. To me, I think that he can still be a very productive player. And if you look at what Boston had in David Krejci, and that's not there now. Like I said, I do have some. I know a lot of the fans watching these videos on this channel. I've gotten comments from a lot of Boston fans. They don't seem to be as concerned about it, at least generally speaking, as I am. But I'm just not as confident that Charlie Coyle is going to get that job done. He hasn't really produced at a second-line center caliber, really his entire NHL career, dating back to his time even in Minnesota or his time so far in Boston. He's had his moments. He's, every once in a while had some great games, but not that he's a bad player. I just think he's better suited for a lower-level duty myself. So to me, maybe that would be a player that they'd be interested in, but they're probably not real keen on the cap hit, so something would have to be worked out with either Calgary retaining a little bit of money or throwing in an extra piece or something. I'm not sure what it would be exactly, but I would suspect that if a deal did take place there, that could be maybe where it is. But when it comes to the Oilers, who are reportedly showing more interest in Calgary when it comes to Jake Debrusk, it's likely going to have to be a case of a player in, player out of similar money, or they'd have to find a way to even things out because the Oilers don't really have a ton of flexibility. As I mentioned, they still have to sign Kailer Yamamoto. They've been fairly busy this offseason. Ken Holland has been making lots of moves, and unfortunately, I will say that a lot of it to me has been quite puzzling. I'm not overly fond of the offseason here that the Edmonton Oilers have had. They have not moved on from Mikko Koskinen. They brought in Duncan Keith, who to me was not terrible for bringing him in, but I don't really care for the return going out per se. And not to say that Caleb Jones was the end-all be-all for their future. And obviously he was a piece they were kind of viewed on as an extra piece that wasn't likely going to be part of their long-term future. So I get that. Not so much issues on that front. But the fact that you look at their back end, you got Duncan Keith, Tyson Barrie, Cody Ceci. I just don't know how well that's going to go from a defensive standpoint. I love Duncan Keith as a professional hockey player, but to me, it's just a few years too late. Like, he's getting to that point where he's not the same player anymore. So, it's just hard to imagine. Now, the Edmonton Oilers at this point are theoretically already into long-term injury reserve. Like, they're already over the salary cap by over $3 million as well. And like I said, they still have Kyler Yamamoto left to sign. So something has to give here. Now, of course, on Cap Friendly, where they show that, they still have 9 defensemen and 13 forwards on the roster. So clearly you can move some players around. You could demote a couple of smaller salaries on the blue line to drop down to 6 or 7D. That'll get you closer, move down a forward. You could bury Koskinen in the minors, get $1 million there, and kind of go from there. So it's not like they're completely, way over. They have means to get this down a bit, but obviously there's not a lot of wiggle room. So for the Oilers to pick up Jake Debrusk, they would have to trade out a player that would have similar type of money. Now, would they want to maybe do a Zach Kassian for Jake Debrusk? I mean, I don't know how Boston's going to feel about that. I mean, similar money. Cassian's obviously a fair bit older, though. Not going to give you that consistent offense. I mean, he plays a rough style of game, which they do appreciate there, but I'm not really sure that's going to get it done. They just brought in Zach Hyman. They just brought in Warren Fogle. Kyle Turris is a player they'd love to move with 1 year left, but I don't know if that's going to really help. I mean, it's just complicated. I'm not really sure what the Bruins would get back to make things really even out here. Now, the other thing with Edmonton, too, to keep in mind is that they also have Oscar Klefbom, a $4 million long-term injury reserve. He's not expected to play this year, and he might be done for his career. It's quite possible. He has 2 years left at 4.1. So theoretically, they still have room in LTIR without that, or with considering that, I should say, sorry. And then, of course, like I said, they have a few players they can demote to get their roster size down a little bit to create a little bit more flexibility. So it's not like they absolutely can't do a move. It's just, it's tight. They don't have a ton of space there. So how Edmonton will pull it off, I don't know. So let me know your thoughts on Jake Debrusk. Do you see him going to either the Oilers or the Flames, and what kind of return package would make sense in those scenarios? Now, when it comes to Jack Eichel, a couple of articles lately. The one I'm going to reference today comes from Dave Pagnotta of the fourthperiod.com. Just kind of updating the whole situation here. As it stands right now, nothing has changed on Jack Eichel in regards to wanting his surgery. I guess we can refer to somewhat as experimental surgery, at least in the hockey world. The artificial disc replacement surgery. Nothing at all has changed for what he wants. He still wants that surgery. He still wants to be traded. And nothing has happened at this point. He has had no surgery. So at this point, considering we're getting into the latter part of August now, it's pretty safe to say that Jack Eichel would not be ready for training camp, because that's going to have to be remedied before he can get back on the ice. So obviously it looks as though Buffalo is really letting this drag out to the point that the next team that he ends up with can be the ones to decide on that surgery, and they got their return before he has it. So I get that. I'm not surprised one little bit. However, it's just getting to the point where he's going to end up missing more time. They would let him have this surgery earlier in the offseason. He would have been good to go, and it could very well delay a trade from happening here. Like I said, the last time we heard from Eichel was this kind of sad emoji face on Twitter just in the past week, and it's kind of been reported here that Eichel is still very much sad and frustrated that this has not happened yet. His agents, that we know, had put out that scathing report back at the end of June saying that they fully expected a trade by the time free agency opened. Free agency's been open now for like 3 weeks, and we still have nothing. So clearly, everybody involved here on Eichel's side is extremely frustrated. According to Dave Pagnotta, the teams that are still being reported as kicking tires and still having conversations with the Buffalo Sabres around this player, are a couple of Eastern teams with the Rangers and the Blue Jackets. And in the Western Conference, we've got the Calgary Flames, the Vegas Golden Knights, and the Anaheim Ducks. They're the 5 teams that are, like I said, are still, according to the most sources, still interested, still kicking tires. I don't think we can completely rule out some other teams that have been in the mix in the past, because if they get word that something's changed and that the price is going to change, they'll likely jump back in. So clearly, the preference, though, we've known for some time, and it was reported here again by Pagnotta, is that the Sabres would prefer to send him west, but at the end of the day, it's going to boil down to the best package. If they can get that best package from the Rangers instead of the Flames or the Ducks, then that's going to, possibly be how it goes. Like I said before, the Rangers appear to be very, very interested to have for a long time, but they're also only willing to pay a certain price. So if the Ducks come calling and they're willing to throw Trevor Zegras in there, or we get the Calgary Flames, I mean, I don't know what the Flames are going to offer. That's the only thing is I can see the need in Calgary. I just don't know. They don't have, I mean, they have Connor Zary. He's a good young prospect, but they're going to want a center going back. Would Buffalo take Sean Monahan? I mean, you're looking at including a guy like Matthew Tkachuk maybe, and again, you might have to, and they're not going to do that. There's no way Calgary includes Matthew Tkachuk, because then you get rid of Tkachuk, you bring in Eichel, it's one step forward, one step back. You're no further ahead. They're very different players, too. They could play very well together, though, if they were to team up. So we'll see what happens at this point. Like I said, an Eichel trade could very well kind of be very, very similarly eerie to what we saw with Erik Karlsson in the long drawn-out process with the Ottawa Senators before he was ultimately traded to the San Jose Sharks, where we get to training camp, and then we don't have a deal. And then although the deal kind of went down very quickly once camp was officially underway, I think we were, was it the first or second day of camp, and then Karlsson was gone. And very well could come down to that because they're not going to want the distraction and the hoopla and everything that goes with it, and he may not even want to report anyway. So let me know your thoughts on where you think Eichel finally ends up, and we'll discuss that further down in the comments. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.